Hey, this is Andrew Spyker, and I wanted to tell you about some recent additions that we've made to the XML Feature Pack beta for the application server, and specifically walk you through some samples that show the new additions. So in the last set of demos, I showed you just how to get started with the feature pack, and I showed you some of the simple invocation samples. But in this demo, I'd like to show you some of the end-to-end samples of how you would use this in a real J2E application running on the application server. So first of all, I'll show you the XPath sample, and then I'll show you the XSLT sample, both the version 2.0, so I can show you the new features. In the XPath example, this is a sample that takes data from a Blogger web publishing service API for a blog. It actually is using some fake data, but it actually, if you run the sample, you can connect it to your own Blogger account. But it simply takes a profile ID of a Blogger ID and goes out and gets all the blogs associated with that profile ID, and then lets you look at the comments that are on that specific blog. An interesting thing is all the data that comes back from this web API, much like many other web services, is completely in XML format. In this case, it's an Atom feed, and I'll show you the data, but to make it very easy to work with, this application will go out and filter that data and look for comments that may be questionable on that on your Blogger account. So you can see it's picking up all the of course, this is fake data, but it's picking up everything that was posted by anyone that was anonymous, searching for certain keywords, looking for questionably vulgar words, and it's letting you have links and access to that on your feed, so then you could go delete those, and it gives you a very easy way to do that. And the reason why this is so easy to do with the XML feature pack is that this data in question, you can see this is off of my Blogger account. You can see that when I make the call to the Blogger web service, the data it returns is in XML format, and it has in here the basic information about the blog. Specifically, comments again comes back as an Atom feed, and you can see that for each comment there is XML that describes the comment and how would you access that XML. In the last demo I showed you could do this with DOM, and I showed you the value of doing that with XPath and how much simpler it is. We're going to return to that sample. So if you look at the HTML page, you'll see that it's actually posting forward to a servlet. You can see that the servlet, all it really does is collect the profile ID that's submitted, and then it calls this Blogger API's prepared class, and it says get all the blogs. It will then forward to a JSP to show the output that you saw, and there's another one if the action was to look for all the comments, which was the second click I made. It will go out and get all questionable comments, and let's show how those are implemented. So the heart of the implementation of both of those methods is XPath. So I showed you the XML content, and you can see in XPath for getting all the blogs that were associated with my profile ID, it called out to the service, and you can actually see that in the get all blogs. You can see that it gets the input stream, and if I look at the implementation of that, if it's the fake profile ID which you saw, it's going to go out and just get a local file, but it actually has the code to actually connect up to blogger.com and get the actual data. When that data comes back, we will run the XPath against it. We'll create a list of Blogger beans to hold the data that we're going to find. We'll create the input stream source from that. We'll execute this XPath executable that is get all blogs XPath, and then we'll go through the data. We'll get back a sequence cursor. We'll walk through the data, and we'll create a blog bean of that data. And basically the blog bean contains the ID for the blog and the blog title. And we'll iterate through the sequence of returned data that comes back from that XPath execution. If we look up at how this was defined, you can see that it's defined statically and initialized statically. If you look at the servlet code, it'll actually call this method initialize XPath, which creates a new factory we talked about in the last demo. We'll create a new static context. It actually will use some new functionality of the refresh, and it will say to use the compiler, so it'll actually will compile this XPath down to Java code that will execute much more efficiently. We'll declare the namespaces that are used in the XPath, and then we'll prepare that XPath and store it away into that executable that we executed. If you look at what the XPath actually is, we're going to go against the Atom feed. We're going to look for all entries that have .blog dash, which is the syntax that Blogger uses for identifying the blogs. And we're going to return a sequence, as you would expect, of the ID and the title. So now if you look at the more complicated scenario, the get all comments, you'll see very similar. We'll create a different static context. Again, we'll use the compiler mode, and we'll declare a few namespaces. We'll declare the same one we did above, but we'll also declare my prefix, which is a way that I can use to get to some of my local Java data and Java functions. We'll declare some variables that are going to be bound into the XPath, one for quote-unquote vulgar names, one for how many months ago. If we go back to the sample, you can see that it's actually saying, I'm not interested in all comments, I'm just interested for comments in the last 12 months. And it will bind in a function, it'll declare a function instead of a variable for legacy content analysis. So this is going to bridge the gap to Java code that you had, and that can execute in the context of doing the XML logic. And in the end, it will prepare this XPath for getting all the comments and store that to be executed later. So let's look at the XPath that's used in this case.